Hey, welcome everyone. We'll get started here in just a minute. Looks like we have our panelists on. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, wherever you are right now. We've got folks from around the world. A few more folks joining in. We'll give a couple of minutes and we'll get started. This is going to be a fun one. I've been looking forward to this webinar. A lot of good stuff coming up. Okay, everyone, let's do this. I'm ready to get started. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for my esteemed panelists and participants in the webinar today. If this is the first time you've joined this webinar, we're having 4 of these webinars every week, but I want to tell you a little bit more about them and we'll get started here in this panel here in a few minutes. But I'm excited to be your moderator. My name is Mark Thomas. This is a groundbreaking series for us, right? We're exploring this whole evolving landscape around digital trust. You've no doubt heard the term before. And these are top experts from around the world. And you know most, if not all of the professionals, not only on this webinar, but on the other webinars we're doing. But beyond just having their expertise, I'm proud to call each one of these panelists not only a colleague of mine, but we become personal friends. And one of the things that we do is we all have calls, we have discussions around different topics that are shaping the future of our industry. So what we wanted to do was have a series of webinars to let you listen to the things we talk about when we're sitting at a happy hour, when we're having coffee, and we're discussing certain things that are taking place across the industry. Now, you know, there are 4 webinars. This is the 3rd of 4 webinars. Look at the lineup of all of the professionals we've had on every one of these. Now, you are only meeting a few of these professionals today in this webinar. And this one, which is the 3rd one, we're talking about bridging this gap. We're talking digital trust, zero trust, cybersecurity, and privacy. It comes up a lot. People always ask, well, what's the difference between all these things? And why do I even need to think about digital trust? Right? Is there a connection or are they separate? And that's what we're really going to be talking about in this webinar today. So here are the panelists we have for today. Of course, you see them on the left, but the purpose here is to look at this intersection, right? They're separate, but they're different. And I've always said that, you know, you can be secured, you can protect privacy, you can pass your audits. But if your customers, your users, and your consumers don't trust you, none of that matters. And that's what we're going to try to put that link, because there's always that confusion between digital trust and zero trust. Mark Thomas is my name. I'm actually talking to you from Tallahassee, Florida, in a hotel. I'm originally from Phoenix, Arizona. And when we finish up today, I'm on an airplane back to the desert. We've got Veronica coming to us from Nairobi. Good. I think it's good afternoon, Veronica. Is that right? What time is it for you? Okay, I think she's on mute.
Sorry, Mark, I was on mute. It's afternoon here.
Very good. Well, glad you made it. So I was a little worried. Veronica travels often, as many of the panelists do, and we were praying that she didn't have any flight delays, so she made it home safely. Veronica, thank you very much. Ed McCabe talking to us from Kentucky, USA. Good morning, Ed. What time is it for you today?
Bourbon time. No, it's a little after 8 o'clock in the morning here. Uh, Dealing with some flood recession, but all good, all good.
Ed, I've got to say this. I saw a dad joke, what we call dad jokes this morning, because I look at your profile picture, and then I look at your beard, and I saw this dad joke that said, um, I, I I used to hate my beard until it grew on me.
It is true. I moved to Kentucky a couple of years ago and have gone
It's
native
kind of a
as it turns
requirement
out.
in Kentucky to have a beard. And thank you very much, Arnolfo, my friend from Mexico. Buenos dias, my friend. How are you today?
Buenos dias, everybody. Yeah, it's very early here. It's 6 a.m. in the morning. So, yeah, I'm very excited to be participating in these awesome sessions with Mark and alongside with all my friends around the world.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, glad you're able to join us. OPM is coming to us from Nigeria. Where are you, OPM? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear. Thank you very much, Mark. And the team, thank you for having me. It's 1 p.m. here in Nigeria, Abuja, Nigeria, the Federal Capital Territory. Thank you for having me.
I had the honor and the pleasure to visit you in Nigeria a couple of years ago.
Yes.
One day I'll come back, friend.
Yeah, we look forward to welcoming you again.
You got it. You got it, my man. We've got Dr. Ramsey. Ramsey, my friend, out in Amman, Jordan. Ramsey, what time is it for you today?
Hi, Mark. It's 3 o'clock, and yeah, it's the end of it's the last day of the working week, day in the week. So we are so excited for this panel.
That's right. Thursdays, it's because a Friday is the first day of the weekend. That's right. Yeah, exactly. So when you get done with this, your weekend starts, my friend. All right. Awesome. Alan Boardman coming to us from London, England. Alan, good afternoon to you. You there, sir?
Good afternoon, Mark. I'm actually in Glasgow. I was running
I'm
a
so,
AI
oh my
workshop.
gosh. That is an American slip. That's my
I'm
apology.
normally from London, but I'm in Glasgow. I was running a AI workshop for the Scottish chapter yesterday. So delighted to be part and really looking forward to a great discussion.
Awesome. Well, thanks everyone for joining. So for everybody on the call, just a couple of ground rules we have here. For panelist questions, we'll all be keeping an eye out on the Q&A. If you have a question, go out to the Q&A and drop it. We might not be able to get to every question, but what my suggestion is if you have a question for a specific panelist, put their name in the Q&A so that they can either answer you in the Q&A or we can get that answer into our discussion. Okay. So again, like we said, we may not get to all your questions when we're finished. If we didn't get to your question, we're not going to be republishing any answers to this. But what you can do is you have the information for every single panelist out on the registration page. You've got their email address and you've got their LinkedIn that you can reach out to each one of those if you need to. I do need to remind everybody, this is an unsponsored panel. You may notice that most, if not all of us, are members of an association called ISACA, because we talk about a couple of the products from the association, but this is unsponsored. You're not going to get any emails after this trying to sell you anything. What we're going to do is we'll record this course, and then within the next day, we'll be able to get this recording for this course out on YouTube, and of course, you'll be able to pick this link up on the social media links for any of your friends or your contacts through LinkedIn to be able to see that. Okay. All right. So let's move on here. I think it's time for us to really get started. What we've done is we put together a series of topics and questions that we'd like to discuss for the next hour and a half. And believe me, an hour and a half goes very fast. But let's start here. We're going to start at kind of a high level, and there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of talk about this whole idea called digital trust. And we've seen it for the last couple of years, and you can't go out and see any article today that doesn't somehow talk about trust. And a lot of folks believe that trust is trying to replace these core concepts of security, cybersecurity, privacy, and a lot of other topics. Is this how you see it? Or is there a different perspective regarding the relationships between digital trust, cybersecurity, and so on? And there's also this thing called zero trust, but we're going to talk zero trust a little bit more here in just a little bit. Hey, Dr. Ramsey, I'm going to start with you. You do a lot around cybersecurity, privacy, and digital trust. What do you see here as the connection between all these things?
Great, Mark. Actually, digital trust doesn't replace the core concept of cybersecurity. It's actually utilize everything that's happening in any organization from cybersecurity resilience program perspective, covering the current cybersecurity profiles, target cybersecurity profiles, risk identification, analysis, assessment results as well. In addition to the defense in-depth technologies such as zero trust and others, to build a robust digital trust program around the organization offering from products and services. So it acts as a new engine for utilizing cybersecurity results and achieving higher maturity within the organization and protecting their services.
And you talk about maturity too, and we chatted about this a little bit in the last webinars. Right now, there's not really a digital trust maturity index as far as we know, and I think there's a lot of folks really trying to put those things together. But do you think that when we're talking about the maturity of digital trust, do you think that a cybersecurity or a privacy event, right? Do you think that could have a significant effect on the trust people have for an organization?
Definitely, if they will use, for example, international standards as, for example, NIST Core Security Framework or 2.0 or PCI Payment Card Industry, PCI DSS version 4.0.1 controls, and as it is a focus area, and they can also measure the maturity in the cybersecurity controls and their implementation, and utilize those results toward achieving digital trust. So I believe there is a connection between them. There is cross-control mapping that between all those international standards and also digital trust domains, trust factors, and activities, KPIs, KRIs, and the outcome of the processes listed in the digital trust.
Very good. So we saw so your perspective out of Jordan. By the way, we've got such a huge array of different countries in here. Let's go to Mexico. Arnulfo, are you seeing it the same way, or is anything different down where you are?
Yeah, definitely, Mark. I totally agree with Ramsey, and I have a slide that I want to share like quickly. Can I do that?
Come on, you got it. You sure can. Share it
All
away.
right. Just so give me a minute to share. I think that is a cool graph here, the one that I have here, and do you already see on my screen, right? Yeah. So if I may build on the top of what Ramsey was telling us or was sharing us, I always like to highlight the holistic nature of the digital trust, because it's a concept that reminds us that the whole is greater than the sum of all its parts. This means, or in other words, that if we see this graph here, 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 set individually maybe just be isolated efforts, but together, Mark, they create something far more powerful than any individual here. The same goes for audit, governance, risk, and security. If we can see it here, we can see that all these concepts on their own, they add value. Of course, they add value. But when they are aligned under a shared purpose, they become something greater. They become something, they become the very foundation of the digital trust, right? So each one contributes from its own perspective, but together they pursue the same mission: to build and protect the trust in a digital world.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Again, anyone could jump in on here. I think that really makes sense a lot. Let me go ahead and share my screen back up. My apologies. Hold on. So the way I'm looking at it is that digital trust, all of those pieces you talked about, those are ingredients, right? And if I don't have good cybersecurity, if I don't have good security hygiene practices, it could affect my my trust. If I don't have good assurance and audit, it can affect that. But I think there's some operational things in there as well. I know we're talking about security, cybersecurity, and digital trust, and so on. But there's also some non-security things that could diminish my trust. Think about CrowdStrike, for example, right? CrowdStrike was not a cybersecurity or privacy incident. CrowdStrike was an operational incident, right? It was change control, configuration management, a little bit on the third-party piece in there as well. So I like how you kind of put that together, because all those together end up being digital trust, right? And so one of the things we talked about in a previous webinar is, how do you measure this whole idea of digital trust? It comes down to your customers, right? It comes down to your customers. And I've told the story in another one of our webinars, that Marriott, the hotel chain Marriott, I'm actually sitting in a Marriott right now. I trust Marriott, right? Matter of fact, I've gone through a couple of breaches that Marriott has had, and I've received emails from Marriott saying, hey, FYI, some information was exposed, but I still like Marriott. There was a cybersecurity incident. There was a matter of fact, I think they got fined under GDPR, but I still like them. Why is it that I still like Marriott, right, when other people do not trust Marriott because of those cybersecurity incidents? There's so many different things out there that are really interesting that can affect that whole thing. All right, very cool. Anybody have anything to add on this one?
Okay, I like to jump in.
Please.
I think I like the way he has presented it, in a way that we begin to look at digital trust from an holistic approach, where you look at cybersecurity, private as enablers of digital trust. Because at the end of the day, It's not just about the digital capability. It's about whether stakeholders are willing to trust, those capabilities and to leverage them to create value and capture value for themselves. So it's important to see digital trust at the end of the whole value creation process, and cybersecurity, privacy, compliance means to that end.
Yeah. It totally makes sense. All right, well, good. I think we've established kind of a baseline here. We know there's a connection, there's a relationship between digital trust, information security, cybersecurity, and those types of things. I want to dive a little bit deeper into this trust and its reliance on security and privacy. Now, I've had a challenge that trust just depends on security, privacy, and those kinds of things, because I think there's a lot of other things involved. There's branding, different loyalties can be in there. But can an organization lose digital trust, even though they protect information, they protect privacy? What are some examples of this? Alan, you've seen a lot of this. You've been presenting around the world, and you probably have touched more organizations than all of us together. And so I want to go over to Alan and say, hey, how does trust rely on these things? And do you have any examples you might be able to share?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, Mark. And I'm gonna, as you know, I'm a keen sportsman. I love all sports, really. And one of my passions. So I'm gonna use
Hey,
the
you need
game.
to tell us a little bit about your passion, by the way. You need to tell everybody about what you do, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I do a lot of
Give us a
volunteering at
30-second.
major sports events around the world. I mean, I've just recently come back from the Special Olympics in Winter Special Olympics in Turin, Turin, rather Torino. And I've just got a message this morning saying I'm in the running for Milano and Cortina for the Winter Games next January. So yeah, really looking forward to those. I mean, I've done, I think, 4 or 5 Paralympics around the world and most of the Olympics and other big sports events. So yeah, a real big passion of mine.
It's amazing watching, man. It is amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. So, Mark, back to your point, I'm going to use a game analogy. So, if we think of security and privacy as entry fee to the game of digital trust, okay? Without them, you're out of the game, okay? Totally. But even if you get them right, you're not guaranteed this whole thing around digital trust. I mean, trust is the ultimate. That's where you want to get to. So even if you have perfect security and you're privacy compliant, you can still lose trust if you opaque or if you unethical or if you're just out of tune or tone deaf to your stakeholders. So really important to get those other things right. And I'm going to talk about some examples in a moment. If we think of social media in the early days before our kind of data privacy regulations, I mean, they were really stretching some of the stuff. They weren't unlawful, but they were certainly and I'm not going to mention any names, but you can work them out for yourselves. They were certainly
We can
pretty
figure those out, I'm sure, right?
very unethical. And I think of some specific examples. There was one in the US in 2021, a stock called GameStop, where a lot of people made a lot of money quickly and also lost a lot of money on a trading platform called Robinhood. And Robinhood then pulled out. They basically said, we're going to stop you trading on this because of, they made up some collateral requirements, etc. So no, nothing illegal, but certainly big question marks around fairness. And there was actually a congressional review into this because it was found that there's some big issues around regulations and fairness of the market. So that's a specific example. Zoom had this issue during the pandemic where they were talking about having end-to-end encryption. And yes, they had some encryption, but it wasn't exactly how it worked. It wasn't totally accurate. So, they lost a little bit of trust there, or quite a lot of trust, really, because the perception gap there was that, you could trust Zoom to have end-to-end encryption. And then I've mentioned the social media companies. Legal isn't necessarily it doesn't always give you the ethical piece. You need to be ethical as well. So just to kind of summarize that, we need to ensure that we've got these other key aspects in place as well around accountability, ethics, consistency, transparency, and making sure that we're, able to act in a way that our stakeholders, our consumers, our users can trust us. So trust is, emotional, it's around ethical, it's around human behavior. So it's much, much more than just privacy and security.
I agree with you on that. And my mother, my late mother, I remember here a few years ago, you all might recall there was one of our credit reporting agencies was compromised, and I had a discussion with my mom, and she was talking about trust on this stuff, and she said, I get this letter from this credit reporting agency that said my private information has been compromised, and they're going to do all these things for me. And she said, wait a second. I never gave them permission to collect that private information about me. And I said, Mom, sometimes there are organizations that sometimes, you have to trust them because they're collecting your information. And some of them are not asking for your permission. She did not trust the credit reporting agencies. And I always like to use my mom on the whole trust thing as well. And she did not trust technology. Right? She did not trust when she passed away and we were you know finishing up her estate. She had no credit cards. My mother would not use a credit card. She never went to an ATM. If she needed cash, she walked into the teller at Wells Fargo and wrote a check to get cash. She would never do anything via digital kind of transaction. So it was kind of interesting where us, right, the folks here on this call, we do everything digitally. We do banking digitally, all those things. But I think you're right. It's not just security and privacy. It's branding. It's operational kind of things. I can lose trust in an organization just through a conversation. It doesn't have to be a transaction. And I can lose trust in an organization because of the technology they use as well. I've told this story before. My son lived in China it was a professor exchange where he lived and worked in China for a little bit of time. And he said, Dad, the only way we can communicate with each other is on a platform called WeChat, right? And WeChat, Chinese, very Chinese government influenced app. And he said, everything we say on WeChat will be monitored. And so it was interesting. I trusted him, but I didn't trust the technology. And there was obviously no security or privacy on that. So I want to open it up to the other folks here on the call. Alan gave some great examples. Can you think of some other examples that might be relevant on this one?
So I'm going to dive in. So as a hardcore security geek, I know that privacy and security matter to a lot of people. I also know as an incident responder that's going to be compromised. So I look at additional factors for what an organization, and Alan did a great job at teeing up the necessity for ethical practice and transparency. That's what I look at, the transparency, the reliability. Oh my God, if I can't order something at 2:30 in the morning from Amazon, I'm going to drop my Amazon account, right? And I think collectively, I think that's where we may be at. When it comes to how the organization and practices, if I discover that an organization is taking data that I've entrusted to them and using it beyond the methods of what they said, I'm going to get really suspicious and sus. Even though they may be doing it in a secure fashion, I'm going to be looking at it like, well, why are you using it beyond its means? From a transparency perspective, and we're seeing this right now with one of the larger healthcares where they were using AI, but they can't really explain what the AI was doing when it came to claims processing. As a professional and practitioner, I see a lot of organizations that check the box when it comes to data security and privacy. I see others that go above and beyond. As a individual, I'm looking at, what else is the organization doing? And that influences heavily whether or not I will trust them. I know that organizations are going to get breached. I know there's going to be compromises because as it turns out, people are human and people make mistakes. And criminals like bad things. So
and it seems we get desensitized to it a little bit, right? I mean, if one of today's breaches happened 10 years ago, we would have all freaked out. Now we just shrug it off because it's become part of normal operations that we expect those things to happen. And that's too bad. That's too bad. But you know what? I can choose to work with an organization because of those things. Another example that I have is Target. You've heard me tell this story before. right? Is Target had a breach. It was a third. Matter of fact, the Target breach in the U.S. started to drive this whole thing around third-party risk, vendor risk, and supply chain risk. And so, I was a victim of the Target breach, and I no longer shop at Target. Right? It's funny because Marriott, I've been compromised with Marriott 3 times. I still go to Marriott. I was compromised by Target 1 time. I do not go back to Target. And so there's kind of a psyche behind, branding, how they treat you. And I think incident response has a lot to do with it as well, as how well am I treated? Because like you said, it's going to happen. It's become part of the fabric of doing business digitally now. And it just comes down to how well are you treating me when this actually happens? I think that's pretty interesting. Yeah. Good. Anybody have any follow-ups on this one?
Yes, Mark, I just wanted to share an example also in what happens in this other side of the world. So I would say specifically in East Africa, trust would mean accessibility and transparency in a form that in Africa, apparently in some parts of Africa, I would say, just having a SIM card for your phone, it is much more better than having a bank account or anything. You're able to transact with just having a SIM card. You're able to make all transactions you need. You're able to know how much money do you have, what the transaction costed, able to communicate with just having a SIM card. So in this other side of the world, trust may mean accessibility and transparency. Thanks.
Yeah. And actually in Kenya, don't you have, is it called M-Pesa?
M-Pesa, correct.
It was one of the most advanced money financial transaction apps it was impressive. M-Pesa is, yeah. So
I can tell you, I can spend a whole year without touching cash or even going to the bank because my SIM card is able to help me pay all the bills. I can sort out every transaction with just having my mobile phone and my SIM card.
I thought that was amazing. I remember my first trip to Kenya when I learned about M-Pesa, and I thought this is more advanced than any place I've ever seen when it comes to cashless transactions. It was so simple, and kudos to Kenya for doing that. It's really, really advanced. So, and it's trustworthy too, right? You trust using M-Pesa to send money to a vendor or money to a friend. Yeah.
Every transaction, correct.
Yep. It's amazing. All right. Well, very cool. Okay. So Ed, you just kind of finished up giving us some examples. I'm going to stay with you here for a second because I've got a topic coming up next that I consider you an expert on. Okay. So when we talked about this first topic, I get a lot of questions. Anytime I do a digital trust presentation, cybersecurity presentation, I always get this question, and you probably do as well, because there's some confusion about this difference between digital trust and zero trust, right? Because a lot of people say, oh, isn't that kind of the same thing? Why are you just making up a new word for this? So I want to take a step back and define a couple of key terms, and hopefully you can help here. So digital trust and zero trust, they're mentioned together, but what do they actually mean?
And that's a great question, because I think the best one that I've heard though, Mark, is we have zero digital trust. And I was like, what? And they're like, we have this initiative. They are related, they're similar, but they are definitely not the same thing. When we look at digital trust, this is the broader concept that is aimed at the trustworthy of those interactions and relationships that we have with our stakeholders. Where zero trust is a specific security strategy and the resulting architecture designed to reduce the uncertainty, prevent unauthorized access, make sure that the organization is protected and done in a way that matters. So the way I tend to look at it is the zero, or the digital trust is the what and why we want to do something. The desired outcome is to have that trustworthy relationship with our stakeholders. Well, when we get into the zero trust, this is the turning of the wrenches and the how, right? So taking that security model to help achieve that trust results in minimal risk to the organization, that we verified digital interaction. So when we look at it, the digital trust offers that broad perspective on the desired outcome for the enterprise, with zero trust being how we're going to deliver on that to our stakeholders.
Very good. So, Alan, you see you nodding your head. You probably have something to add on this one.
Yeah, I mean, someone kind of penny dropped for me just the other day was digital trust all about how your users feel. Whereas if you compare and contrast that to quite a technical term like zero trust, it's how your network or your systems behave. So those two things are quite different. The one is kind of user focused, digital trust. The other one is your network, your systems, your architecture, how they constructed or architected and how they behave. So that's a kind of clear distinction there, but just kind of building on what Ed was saying there as well.
Any follow-ups on that one?
I'm going to dive in on this one because we actually have two, and Alan, you hit it great, because the zero trust is the technology component, right? This is the bits and bytes. This is where most IT people, especially cyber, live and die. They got into cyber because we don't really deal or like addressing the user component, which tends to be a little bit more squishy and nebulous, and that is exactly what zero trust is. And it was really interesting because when we look at it from a human perspective, people trust in grades, right? So something happens and it influences them, and it's on this spectrum. Whereas in technology, it either is or it isn't. It's up until quantum comes into, post-quantum trust.
That's going to be the next big, the big disruptive technology.
You're right. It's binary, Ed. It's binary, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And this is something that I know when we were talking here with some of our staff, we were talking about, this concept of digital trust. And one of my folks who's very much into the technology, he's like, well, why does this matter if we have zero trust? And I was like, well, because now you can answer not only how you are protecting a system, but you can also now communicate back with your stakeholders how you're protecting your brand, your reputation, how you're ensuring that ethical practices are actually being adhered to, and the level of transparency, giving that high level understanding of where you're at as an organization. Which was like a lights on moment for me, because it was like, everything that we do, even though this is a new concept, it actually plays into the value that cyber actually provides to an organization. But for those of us who work in information assurance or security or audit, we're not usually viewed as revenue generators. We're more in that aspect of revenue and brand protection, right? So being able to show and demonstrate that, hey, we're going to take these relationships that the business has built over, years, and ensure that the longevity of those relationships is protected and maintained, and that, the threats to that are properly addressed. Sorry, I get a little passionate, especially in the morning.
No, and that makes sense, because as you were just saying, anybody who protects information, cybersecurity kind of thing. I want to throw this over to Ramsey. Ramsey, you do this for a living. Your business is information security, cybersecurity, privacy, and you do this throughout your region. Anything to add on that?
Exactly, Mark. I see zero trust as an enabler for digital trust, and I see it as a main control or a main layer of defense to protect your business to be more digitally trusted. But in addition, from intersection perspective, I see also other important solutions that we should focus on: next generation firewall, intrusion prevention systems, XDR, EDR solutions, multi-factor authentication, also major components that should be considered from intersection perspective, in addition to digital trust, to achieve the ultimate goal of digital trust. So it's very important to understand the interrelationship between all these critical components and the critical security controls and mechanisms in use to protect the business and achieve eventually digital trust.
Cool. Yeah. So for all the panelists, I know we've had a couple of questions open up here in the last little bit, and I want to kind of, if you all can open up your Q&A, kind of look at this. We got a question from James. He says, what role do the following play in digital trust? And his follow-up was platform feedback, user experience, and honesty. I'm not sure I understand the context of the question, but does anybody have a response to that one? That would be from James. You see that one? I think we might have hit some of those. I'm not quite sure what we're looking for on that one. Ed, you're on mute.
Trust me, I can work technology.
That was platform feedback. I don't trust you anymore, by the way.
The question is going to be two parts. So the answer is yes. It's going to be tied into all three of those, right? Because from a platform standpoint, is it something that is easy to use? It's going to benefit me? Is it intuitive? I think Steve Jobs set the bar really high by making the iPod where you could access and set up within 3 steps of start, right?
Yeah.
If I have a good user experience, that's going to weigh in on whether I continue to operate and do business. And then when it comes to honesty, absolutely, I'm going to be transparent. I'm going to be, I'm not going to try and hide anything. There might be a little analytical company, maybe Cambridge something or other. I've heard.
Oh yeah, something a couple years ago. Yeah, I think I remember
that they. I think they. Some book of the face, I think, was responsible for sharing information, and they weren't really, open about how that was being used, and as a result, a lot of people do not trust. And I crack up sometimes because I know my mother has been in business for decades, and she's furniture retail.
Okay.
She would start up a store and everything, and one thing that I learned from her that she constantly beat into us as we ran the store is people will do business with individuals or organizations that they know, they like, or they trust. And the key thing here is if you have a good positive user experience, if your services actually meet the needs and don't require me to spend 6 months wading through documentation, although that is like a fun thing for me, and I can understand how it's used and how it interacts, that helps achieve my business goals of establishing the trust. Now, from the zero trust perspective, I think we're all in passionate agreement that all those tools that Dr. Ramsey has mentioned go to support not just the technical objectives of cybersecurity, but also the business strategy, the goals and objectives of achieving digital trust.
Yeah. No, I think that makes total sense because my father and many of our parents used to say, "Hey, I trust somebody when I shake their hand and they look at me in the eye." Right? We don't have that anymore. There has to be. This is the digital version of shaking a hand and looking at a person in the eye to get that trust. And because one of the things you were talking about on zero trust, and I like it, is the premise there is assume that everything is untrustworthy until proven trustworthy, right? When it comes to transactions, when it comes to third parties, and so on. Digital trust takes it kind of from that point to the consumer, right? Because we're trying to make sure that the consumers trust us. But there's a lot of relationships here when it comes to trust, is the trust between the service provider and the service consumer, whether that's financial or whatnot. There's that trust between two peers, right? I trust you, but I may not trust the technology between us. We talked about that. There's trust between companies and maybe even citizens and their governments, right? Do you trust your government? I do an e-filing of my taxes. Just did it last week. Do I trust that information about my taxes and my personal income are protected, right? There's also, this trust between us and third parties, which is interesting, is zero trust. It's really difficult because I do not trust. I may trust my third party, but I don't trust the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th parties in that digital supply chain. I don't, because I know nothing about them. So I think that's pretty interesting. I did get a question out here on digital trust, and I do have another question above that I want to hit. But the question is zero trust not misleading towards executive management as a team? Zero. You guys see this? Zero. Really, it looks like conflict with trust. I'm not quite sure I get that. Alan, you want to take that one?
Yeah, and I totally see where Mark's coming from this. Thanks, Mark, for that interesting observation. I mean, if you're talking to management, you talk about zero trust, it's kind of starting from a position of we don't trust this stuff. What I like to do is build it out, and Mark, you've mentioned that already to some extent, is trust but verify. So trust,
Okay, there
zero
you go.
trust
Yeah,
is
yeah.
really talking about we can trust it, but we need to verify it. Because when you just say to management, this is zero trust, it kind of implies that we don't trust this stuff.
I'm gonna say I'm gonna take that a little bit further, Alan, and go. I think the focus is verify and then trust, right? Is because if we inherently
Was it-
trust,
Yeah, yeah.
it's gonna. I mean, I trusted OPM, the Office of Personnel Management,
Oh
with
boy.
my records, right? Because U.S. government and whatnot, and now I have data probably sitting in a big chicken-shaped country to the west of us, and if you think that resetting a password is hard, imagine having to reset your fingerprints.
Yeah.
Blowtorch and sandpaper is what comes to mind.
Oh my gosh, that's funny. All right, so let me take a scan through these questions. First, make sure we got them covered, and we'll head to the next one. Up earlier when we first started, one says, "But what should we do, or how can we proceed when digital trust is not an option, but an obligation? For example, handling our administrative procedures with government is not transparent when it does with our data." Okay, so it basically says, do you have a choice sometimes, right? And that's kind of what that's hitting. Anybody have any comments on that one?
So I think that you don't always have a choice, right? So if government official request for my passport, for example, ask me to provide some details about my personal information and health information, I probably don't know how the data is being managed or governed or captured or stored or processed.
Mhm.
But the fact that I respond or yield to their request does not necessarily mean that I trust them. But
Yeah.
sometimes you have to just live with that. But it
Yeah.
will be a very good ideal to get to a point that your interactions and transactions with customers, with employees, with government, with citizens come with some level of trust, especially because of the emotional value that it gives an individual. Right.
Yeah. And that makes sense. It does make sense. And back to, the zero trust, digital trust. We've got Mark that has had a couple comments up there. He says every company has so many suppliers, even network security providers. So zero trust is misleading in his opinion, since organizations do trust third parties. Very hard to explain to management, and I get that. I'm not sure there's an answer to that. It might just be more of a kind of a comment on that. So I truly believe in this digital supply chain. The further you get away from your third party, the least amount of trust that you have, because it's unknown. So okay, and for time purposes, folks, I think it's time for us to move on, and I want to hit another question and kind of hit this next one that talks about governance here. OPME, you just answered that question. I consider you one of our governance experts here. You've been in governance for a long time. You are an expert in a lot of the governance frameworks. So we've linked digital trust with security, privacy, zero trust. I think there's a missing link here, right? I think it's governance. And how can this idea of digital trust kind of link to the idea of governance? Because everybody loves, by the way, everybody loves to throw this term called governance onto behind everything and think it's magically going to work. We have corporate governance, financial governance, IT governance, right? Project governance, service governance, you name it. We throw governance on the end of things and it's supposed to work. But I'm really thinking about this from a digital trust perspective, and I'd like your input on this if you don't mind.
All right, thank you very much. So governance is the basis for which an organization either falls or rise. So, without governance, you are not able to ensure that you are able to capture value effectively. So how do you ensure that you have the right capabilities, suitable, adequate, and effective capabilities to capture value, especially in the digital age. So I think that corporate governance is the road that leads to digital trust. That's the roadway to digital trust. All the other components we talk about, cybersecurity, privacy, even the principle of zero trust. So I like to see zero trust. Not just, it's not a technology. Sometimes some salespeople will say, oh, we have a zero trust technology to sell to you and all of that. But it's more of a design principle. It is about ensuring that you design authenticity, authentication, integrity, into your platforms, into your networks, into your services, infrastructure, and applications. So governance ensures that benefits are realized, that risk is optimized, and that resources are optimized. So all for the purpose of creating value for stakeholders. But value is not enough, right? So I just don't want to capture value. I want to ensure that I can still trust you. So you talked about Marriott, right? So yeah, you get value from Marriott, but you also want to be able to trust Marriott, with your with the services that they render. So you want to be able to go there and feel comfortable, feel like you feel safe, right? You want to ensure that whatever you exchange with them, data, money, personal profile, all of that, it's safe. Target is still doing business, but you are no longer doing business with Target because of, not because they are not generating value, but because they have lost trust and they've not been able to repair their trust in a way that will be satisfactory to you. So it's not just about being perfect. When trust is breached, how do you ensure that you repair that trust? It takes governance to make that happen. And also, how do you ensure that you can maintain that trust over a long period of time? That trust is designed, transparency, accountability, and all the other principles of governance. Yeah. So that would be my take on that.
Opiemi, you and I have had a lot of discussions, about this distinction between governance and management. We've talked a lot about this. I remember you took me to lunch in Abuja, I believe, and we talked about all we talked about was governance versus management, and we both agreed that if you are governing correctly, right, and creating value, that means your organization is meeting its goals. Right. And so I think when we talk about governance, especially with digital trust, is, one of my organizational goals is to make sure that, hey, if I'm a for-profit company, I make my money, my customers like me, I'm creating value for people and those kinds of things. And that's where digital trust is, right? Because if they don't trust us, they're leaving. They will go somewhere else. If we don't govern well, my customers are going to pack their bags and they're going to walk out. So I do want to, in a few minutes, I want to get to this whole idea of assurance and audit. But Arnulfo, I know that you've done a lot around the governance space in Mexico, not just in Mexico, in basically
Latin America,
in Latam. So you have some things you want to add on that one?
Yeah, totally. I completely agree. And to continue with the ideas of Opeyemi, I will say that governance is like the missing link that holds it all together. I mean, security and privacy is what we protect. Digital trust, on the other side, is what we aim to earn. But governance,
wow, that's a quotable quote right there.
Yeah.
That's good.
And let me finish that quote. I will say it again because it sounds very cool, right?
Yeah.
Security and privacy is what we protect, but digital trust is what we aim to earn. But governance, Mark, is how we make it sustainable. So without governance, digital trust will becomes accidental. But with governance, it will becomes intentional. That is the main idea, and pretty much with anything when you talk with things related to governance. I mean, so I think that sums it up. Most of the ideas that I think that OPGMI was sharing us, and the importance of governance behind all these ideas. And I think that because we are we are very linked talking about this. I think that Ramsey has also a couple of ideas that he wanted to share about this. I don't know, if, Ramsey, you were?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Yes. Go ahead,
And,
doctor.
yeah, thank you. And exactly. So I have another thing to share here from governance of information and technology from COVID 2019 perspective, which defines the governance from three main perspective. The ultimate goal of governance is to optimize the risk, is to utilize the resources, and to realize benefits, whether it is more resilience, more security, more privacy, more protection, more zero trust, more controls around your business, about your portfolio, about your services. And the link is actually we did an exercise, remember Mark, previously, and we did a link between all international standards and back to COVID 2019 in trying to map all those international standards and governance framework COVID back to the digital trust framework, and we managed to do this mapping, and there is an interdependencies, and whatever you are doing in your cybersecurity or in your data privacy, GDPR, any other international standards has an effect on your governance framework and your exercising governance and all the output of the whole governance program based on your digital trust framework in use.
Yeah. You know, I always say you can't govern yourself. There's always a governing body or some type of governance structure that drives your decisions. Because if you are asked, if you govern yourself, what you do is make your own rules, determine which of your own rules you choose to follow, and determine the consequences for the rules that you choose to break. So you can't, there's always a governing body. But for an organization, our governing body is a board of directors. But for the company or the organization, our governing body, right, is really our customers and our users and our consumers, and they drive us with what trust they have. OPME, did you have something to jump in on this?
I just want to, in addition to appreciating what everyone already said, I think that one critical value that governance can bring to digital trust is the fact that the more mature you are in your governance system, development and practices, the less likely that there will be a breach in digital trust. So I think there's a relationship, an inverse relationship. The more mature you are, the less vulnerable you are. And that means that the likelihood of impairment of your digital trust is also lower. So I think that helps to sustain digital trust, as Anulfo mentioned, and is something that's very important that leaders of organizations should take very seriously.
Yeah. Hey, so since we've been talking about the zero trust and digital trust, and thank you for that, OPME. There's a question that came in, actually it's pretty good. Isam says, hey, when it comes to cybersecurity with zero trust concept, is there a list of controls that each organization should implement and map with all different standards, mandate zero trust concept like PCI, NIST, etc.? Are you aware of a single, or there are multiple different lists of controls? Anybody have any input on that one? This is the last question that just came in just a few minutes ago.
There's a NIST publication on zero trust architecture, which talks about the principles of never trust, always verify, least privilege access, micro-segmentation, continuous monitoring, and then identity-centric security. So basically, everybody knows who's doing what. And then before you do anything, there's permission to do it. So I think that if we understand the principles, right, the implementation might be tailored to context, conditions, and options that different organizations or stakeholders might have.
Okay. Yeah. And I know that from a digital trust side, one of the things we talked about in the last webinar was what we call the DTEF, the Digital Trust Ecosystem Framework. It does not have a set of controls. It has what are called trust factors, which you can consider control objectives from what we might remember from that. Okay, good. Anybody have anything to add on this one? Because Arnulfo was talking a little bit about about some of the things he has seen, and I want to kind of keep moving forward on this because I kind of like the idea of governance, but how we link this in to this idea of auditing, assurance, that kind of stuff. So when many of us think about a lot of these subjects, we have this third line of defense in our minds, right? We have these three lines of defense, or the three lines model. So let's focus on auditing for a second and overall assurance. Of course, we're aware that you can provide assurance over security and privacy, but I, I haven't seen where you can do the same for digital trust. I'm not sure. I want to open this up, and Arnulfo, if you could kind of kick us off on this, and how do we link this to audit and assurance?
All right. Thank you very much for the question, Mark. And I think that this question, it goes right to the heart of what we as auditors and defenders of digital trust are being calling to do. You're right. When we think about digital trust, we might think naturally, or many of us naturally picture the third line of defense and what we should do there, because in that line of defense, or in that line, right? Because the third line is not called of defense. In that line, it makes a lot of sense to speak or to go around the concept of digital trust, because we evaluate, we provide assurance, and we report on whether controls are in place or not, right? Now, but back to the question, can we provide assurance over digital trust on the same way that we do it for security and privacy? My answer to that question must be a contundent yes, Mark, because but only if we expand our mindset as auditors, we expand our mindset and embrace the use of new tools like the DTEF. And because auditing digital trust isn't just about checking controls, it's about understanding how transparency, ethics, reliability, and accountability are embedded into systems and decisions that are made in an organization. We can and we must assess whether an organization not only protects data, but also respects it, Mark. Because here's the thing, security and privacy are like building blocks, but trust, we know that is a broader thing. It's how data is handled, how decisions are made, and how transparent we are with our users, and how accountable leadership is when things go wrong, like when we suffer a cybersecurity incident. So what does that mean to us as auditors? It means that we are not longer just validating encryption or access controls, for example. We are asking, or we should ask, deeper questions, or we have to answer more complex and deeper questions like, are AI models explainable and fair and well governed, for example? Is the organization, like I was saying, is organization respecting data, or they are just protecting it? That is a powerful concept also. We should not only protect data, we need to respect the data of our customers and clients. In this context, assurance becomes a multidisciplinary effort where cyber, privacy, governance, risk, and ethics converge all together. So I will say that it's not longer about compliance, it's about confidence. So yes, when we audit, or we definitely can audit digital trust, but we must do it, I will say that we must do it differently, not just reviewing what's written, but what's lived across the organization. Maybe Mark, and this is an idea that I have been discussing a lot in some of my conferences where I refer to the concept of extreme audit, but because maybe it's time to stop auditing in 2 dimensions and start auditing in 3 dimensions. And with those 3 dimensions, I will say that we should review what is documented, what's operational, and what is experienced inside an organization. And with digital trust, we may demand, or digital trust may demand us to add a 4th dimension there, the time dimension, because trust is built over time, but it can be lost in seconds. We all know that. So yes, we should, and in fact, Mark, we must audit digital trust, but we gotta do it with a broader vision and with the use of new tools like the Digital Trust Ecosystem Framework, and with a deeper sense of purpose, because we all have to recognize that trust is just not a buzzword. It is in fact our mission, trust. So Mark, so I think that we definitely have to audit digital trust, and we definitely have new tools to do that.
I think you have produced at least 4, 5, maybe 6 quotes that I can put on any of my. I'm telling you, you're the most quotable person I've ever met.
No way. I think that will be it, man. That will be it.
I've been taking notes.
I have done my framework. I'm the auditor, man. I gotta do it something here. This is the part that passions me a lot. The audit, the assurance part, and digital trust. Digital trust is a thing that is not a buzzword, right?
Well, I like what you said. It's less about compliance and more about confidence. I thought that was a really good. That was another quote that I thought was good. So speaking of auditing, Veronica, you've been auditing for quite some time, so you have something to add to that one.
Yes, I do, Mark. Thank you. And thanks for the quotes. I've been taking notes here. So I agree with what Adolfo was saying in that providing assurance for digital trust is a bit complex, and it's a nuanced challenge because digital trust encompasses different aspects of security, privacy, integrity, looking at transparency. I earlier talked about accessibility. Like it requires like a multifaceted approach kind of thing. But all that being said, I would say that the impact of digital trust may be hard to measure, but I don't think it's impossible to achieve. I don't think it is impossible. So if we leverage the frameworks we have already, the controls that we have in place, I think as assurance professionals, it is easier for us to come in and test the effectiveness of the controls that are in place and also give comfort around the controls and the procedures that we've been able to implement. So it is not difficult to achieve. Thanks.
Very good. Ed, you look like you want to talk.
I do. And it may be the fact that I'm a simple Iowa farm boy when we're talking about the complexity of this.
Kentucky.
Well, I am now. I went from being an Iowa farm boy to a Kentucky colonel, believe it or not. I think that and again, I'm a quant, so I like to measure. I like the empirical evidence. I think we already have some of these structures in place. I mean, we can definitely figure out ways to measure almost anything, and measuring digital trust is just another thing. Whether it's customer surveys, monitoring our customers' behavior, are we retaining them? How are we responding to their issues? Getting customer feedback. I think that we have the tools available to us. Because those are, I believe, those are just the tip of the iceberg. So the measurement, the adoption, and the implementation of like digital trust ecosystem gives us that ability to gain those insights for how well we're being trusted. Now, if we're looking for like the gold seal of approval, I don't know if we're going to see that anytime soon. I mean, it used to be said that, you can't really measure a company's value. And then we have, ways to value companies or, I think we can. And maybe it's because of the fact that I am that farm boy that I don't know better that we couldn't, right? So I'm looking at like, how are we retaining? What is our turnover? What is our churn rate? All those fun things. Devil's advocate, because why not?
No, that makes total sense. Anybody have anything to add on this? I know we've hit our auditors. Alan, you've talked a lot about assurance in the past, but I just don't. I'm just looking kind of any other points on audit and assurance.
Yeah, I'll just quickly throw in something here that I'm a little bit concerned that we're just doing it in a silo of digital, but it's a little bit like a comparison of IT governance and how it fits into enterprise-wide governance. I think it's really important that we think about trust in holistically, and obviously digital is a big part of that. So we don't want to be we want to be careful. We don't just go down a kind of solid mentality as everything's around the digital side. And I know it's an important piece, obviously. So that would just be my kind of caution going forward on this one.
Yep, very good. So I have a couple of questions that have just come up talking about kind of linking digital trust and AI. I know we haven't talked about one of the things, by the way, our next webinar next week is specifically focusing on emerging technologies. But I think we have enough folks in this group that know enough about AI to be able to address this. And I'm throwing a curveball in there for everyone. What's the effect here of AI? The first question is Mohammed in Iraq says, "Hey, how the digital trust will play a critical role in AI services." And then we have another one that says, moving AI concepts. So in an AI-driven environment, how do we balance automation and human oversight to sustain digital trust? Anybody have a comment or a position talking about AI and linking those? Ramsey, go for it.
I believe that nobody can ignore the importance of AI when it comes to governance, risk, and compliance.
You use AI in your company on a regular basis,
Actually,
right?
yes,
Yeah.
definitely. We use it in actually in better incident response, in better risk identification and management, and better examinations and detailed forensic investigations as well. So from my point of view, I consider AI as an enabler for the digital trust program that the organization is running. Which will help also in automation and providing the top management board of directors with powerful insights regarding their governance, risk, and compliance exercise toward achieving better key performance indicators and better key risk indicators based on their business and IT goals.
See, and Ramsey, I'm going to come on this one and say I have no problem using AI. But if I ask a question, I want to understand it. I want you to be able to explain it. I want the transparency. I want to know the data provenance in order to be able to trust the results. Right?
Yeah, but it depends on the local modeling. If you are running an obfuscation and local modeling and local learning AI, then this can be trusted rather than utilizing the results of open AI platforms. So definitely there is a differentiator and a thing that can be considered from artificial intelligence and neural network perspective based on the algorithms and training that you are running accordingly.
Well, and I only bring that up because you bring up the ethical framework, and this is definitely not the forum this week to talk about the ethics, but we know that ethics tend to cross boundaries in geographic regions. So what is potentially acceptable in one area may not be acceptable in another, and in order to trust the organization, I think that we're going to have to definitely give a lot more focus and insight definition around how we're going to operationalize AI moving forward. And the reason why is I'm looking at a case that happened up in Air Canada where a bereavement fee was waived for a passenger, even though Air Canada did not have such a policy in place, and it went to court, and the judge was like, well, the chatbot entered into the agreement and said that they would do that, and now you're coming back and saying you don't have that and you're fighting it. So automatically trust is now eroding across the board. Again, depending,
the chatbot made a commitment that the company had no
Yeah.
policy for.
yeah, excessive agency. And I mean,
I haven't heard of that. That's incredible. But the company should support what their AI chatbot committed
Well,
to.
they have to. They have to.
As it turns out, Alan, you are correct. The judge said they have to. But the fact that it had to go to court I mean, as an incident responder, we used to say quite frequently, the no control costs more than that first hour of litigation. Because
there's a quote. We've got so many quotes in this call. It's amazing.
And depending upon, Dr. Ramsey, I don't know how you're using AI, but if I'm using it just for interaction, again, this is one of those things, contextualization of the platform is important, because if your chatbot is disenfranchising a certain group or whatnot, it may have an impact on whether or not I move forward doing business. But if it's being used to tell me, what the weather forecast is and for the next 5 days, I might not actually care. It might not influence me. I think this is something that we definitely have to be concerned about, because we're not putting that genie back in the bottle.
It's protected with the zero trust as well, our chatbot.
Zero
right.
trust in CrowdStrike, right?
Oh my gosh. Alan, go ahead. I think you've got something there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, and we had the discussion yesterday in my workshop actually around, how do you audit, I don't know, the whole AI thing.
Yeah.
And for me, the challenge is that all this stuff we love about transparency and fairness and accountability is suddenly into these black boxes. I mean, how do we ensure that when, AI, especially when you start talking about agentic AI and stuff like that coming into play, how do we get those assurances when essentially, stuff's happening in a black box?
It's the same way we trust the used car salesman, right? Is that the approach we take?
Yeah.
It was driven by a little old lady from Pasadena.
That's amazing. All right. So yeah, so I think we've hit AI a lot. Actually, the funny thing is when you think about AI, and a lot of organizations are struggling here, is the first thing is, do we allow people to use things like ChatGPT, right, so on, to do research? But the other part of AI is the organization creating its own internal AI platform. And that's kind of the idea is, do I trust that the things that are being the decisions being made or the suggestions, do I trust that they're ethical with little to no bias, right? I think that's still up for grabs. I think that's still up for grabs. And that whole the story you just told, Ed, just now is amazing, and it's absolutely amazing. So that means a lot of people now are going to start going to the chat, because they're going to wait for the chat to say something, because that's a commitment, because a precedent has been set that if that chat bot makes you a commitment, the company has to stand by that, right? And if they are an AI platform organization, a human is not approving what that chat bot just said. Yeah.
Mark,
Well,
do you trust? Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead.
no, go ahead, Dr. Ramsey. By all means, it's late in the day for you. It's early here.
I just want to ask Mark if he trusts Delta, because Delta as an airline has been using AI in their autopilot since 20 years. So you still trust Delta, Mark, right? So I believe that the misperception between OpenAI platforms that is hosted somewhere on the black boxes and the science behind the neural networks and artificial intelligence that actually exists since 20 years until now. So if you understand the math, the learning, the modeling, and if it's done right and looked in a scientific approach, then maybe you can utilize some of the results in your corporate governance and your decision making. But definitely, I totally agree with the audience, with my colleagues here, that trusting an open AI results that is sitting somewhere else is something very, very dangerous and will affect the digital trust and all the assurance and any audit programs.
Yep, you got it. Hey, folks, I need to move on because I don't want to keep everybody over time, because we got one more subject that we want to hit here, because it's actually very, very important to me, and I really like this whole idea of this digital trust ecosystem framework. We talked about it a little bit yesterday, but I want to make this link. We've talked about this DTEP before. Actually, Shannon from ISACA told us a little bit about the model. We had several folks on the webinar who were part of the architecture group of the original DTEP. But kind of my question here is, we've got this digital trust ecosystem framework. There's a lot of them out there. This is probably the one that we all agreed on the panel that it was probably the most comprehensive framework around digital trust. So this DTEF, Digital Trust Ecosystem Framework, is it supposed to replace other frameworks, or is it there to augment these other frameworks? I'm just interested in everyone's thoughts on this, and I want to start with you, Veronica, because I know that, Veronica, you've done a lot around this space, around digital trust, around frameworks. I want to maybe you kick this off for us a little bit.
Thanks, Mark, for the question. And I'd like to use a zoom approach onto this question by zooming in and out for us to understand what the framework is all about. So I spent the better part of my professional time in advising clients on which frameworks should they have in place from different industries, and advising them on which controls should they focus on purposely from what particular framework and what not to, helping them when they're developing their IT policies around the control policy they have in place, helping them also define the statement of applicability of different frameworks, because frameworks, yes, they may be available, but are they really applicable to, as per their organization context? So that takes much of my work when I'm doing the assurance and the IT risk assurance work that I do. And what I witness mostly is that most clients leverage multiple frameworks and standards to guide their internal control processes. And I've seen a number of clients that previously had lost trust in customer trust and trust in public because probably of the breaches that happened previously, but because they were able to get certified in a particular standard or framework, you see now they gain probably the customer trust just by having taken the step to become certified in a particular standard. So when it comes to the digital trust framework, I think I would say, and it is safe to say that the digital trust framework was designed to be compatible with various frameworks. Looking at our famous framework, the COBIT 2019, the ITILs and the ISO family of frameworks, I think it would be safe to say that this framework was designed with a view or a foundation of other frameworks that they can work together, even with the upcoming new regulations. And what I find fascinating about the digital trust framework is that it offers a holistic view. I think some of the panelists have already mentioned about this, that it offers a holistic view of digital trust, building upon already the existing frameworks that we have in place, the different standards that we have in place. And it also takes a wider view of how an entire ecosystem of digital trust would be looking like. So, Mark, to sum up my zooming in and zooming out of what I'm trying to say is that the digital trust framework is complementary to other frameworks. It is not a replacement, and it's also not a standalone framework. So it complements other frameworks. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's perfect, because that was the whole idea, and I was part of the the original architecture group, and we had talked a little bit at the last call. Is we didn't want to have a bunch of people who thought we were the smartest digital trust people in the world and create this brand new framework. We pulled the parts of every framework and every standard that were applicable and we put them into a lens called digital trust, and that's what we called those things called trust factors, which was actually very cool. So Dr. Ramsey, I know that you've done a lot around kind of research and looking at digital trust from an automation perspective. Do you have anything to add on that one?
I truly believe that the digital trust ecosystem framework and to the structure of that framework from the domains, trust factors, whether we are talking about culture, infrastructure, architecture, and the main activities around each of those domains and trust factors. I truly believe it covers the enterprise end to end, and I truly believe it's the evolution of all existing programs. It does unify the entire efforts from cybersecurity, cyber resilience, from data privacy, from governance of information and technology, from technology and security solution perspective into a comprehensive integrated roadmap.
Very cool. Arnulfo, I remember it's been a couple years ago when you and I were, I can't remember where we were. We were in Guatemala.
Guatemala,
yeah. In a hotel talking about digital trust. And so I know that you've done a lot of research, you've done a lot of work in this space. Do you have anything you might want to add to this?
Yeah, I have been following your steps, man. So Yeah, I can share a couple of ideas here, building on the top of what Veronica and Ramsey shared. I think that DTF is not here to replace existing frameworks. We all agree on that. It's designed to complement and elevate them, right? So it's not about replacing the NIST and the ISOs and the COVIDs. It's about creating an unifying layer above them, focused on the trust as the ultimate outcome. And if we have time, I can share like a couple of slides related to that, Mark. Do we have time, or
We're down to about 10 minutes left. So yeah, we got to close up here pretty soon.
All right, no, let's go. Let's go for the closing lines, man. And if we have some spare time, I can share you like a couple of slides of this idea. But yeah, definitely, DTF is not here to replace, but to complement and elevate all the other standards and build on the top of them.
Awesome. All right. Anybody have anything left on this one? Because we covered a lot of this on the last webinar, and I completely agree with every comment on this one so far. All right. Well, let's do this, folks. You know what it's time to do. It's time to do our panelist final thoughts. 30-second nuggets. So we're going to go around the group, and what I'm going to do is I want you to give your top tips on the subjects we were talking about today. So I'm literally going to go from the top down. Arnulfo, you were just talking just a minute ago. Might as well keep going. Give us your 30-second nugget. What's your biggest takeaway from this?
I can definitely share like a couple of ideas here related to digital trust. Mark and folks, at the end of the day, digital trust isn't just a framework. I will say that it's a force, Mark. It's a force that turns security into assurance. It's a force that turns compliance into confidence. And it's a force that turns technology into something truly human. So we all, as a defenders of the digital trust, we are not just here to check in boxes. We are shaping the invisible currency of the digital world, because we all know that in a world where trust can be lost in milliseconds, it is our job to make sure it lasts, Mark. That will be my remark here.
So I feel like I have to have a pen and paper every time you talk, because I'm pulling some quotes out of this. Like,
no way, man. No.
I'm teasing you. No, thank you very much. That's excellent. Thank you, Alan. Let's move to you.
Yeah, I mean, I would say essentially, don't forget about those broken windows. Go back to the fundamentals and use those as our foundations and building blocks. So this is not necessarily all new stuff. Just stick to the fundamentals, make sure we focus on fixing those broken windows and getting the fundamentals
Another
right.
quote. I'm telling you, I've got to watch this recording and jot these quotes down. You guys are incredible. Awesome, Alan. So I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm just good stuff coming out of this. Hey, Veronica, let's go to you.
Thanks, Mark. So I'd like to say that before you invest resources into implementing any framework, I would urge you, our listeners, our audience, that first understand the context of the organization, understand the statement of applicability of that framework that you want to implement before you spend any dime on that framework or standard. The other thing is have a blend of industry recognized standards. This will guarantee trust by design in your business processes. And the other one is for frameworks to be implemented effectively, organizations need to invest in people. Because if you have people that cannot implement the frameworks or the business processes as you expect them, the investment may not be worth it. So let's train people, let's retrain, let's reskill, and ensure that we are hiring qualified digital trust professionals. And lastly, no framework is one size fits all. So using a blend of frameworks will give you more value than just relying on one. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Let's move on. Opiemi.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to reemphasize and reiterate the value of governance, right? Like you need to see everything from that lens because governance is the means of minimizing value leakage and actually optimizing value for the organization. So trust is about ensuring that your stakeholders have confidence in what you're doing. And that confidence today in this world is very valuable. It's a critical asset to any organization. Trust is social capital and it's real capital, right? So even if you have financial capital and you lose that social capital, you may have lost a lot of value. So governance should overlay everything that you do in this digital age, and that will ensure that you're able to foster digital trust across all your other domains like privacy, cybersecurity, and all of that. Thank you.
Yep, that's perfect. Excellent. All right, Ramsey, let's go to you.
I truly believe, Mark, that the digital trust is the main topic in each board room, and it's one of the main objectives of any executive management is to enhance their profits, enhance their market share, their acquisitions among other and achieving a competitive edge among others in the same industry. And I truly believe that whatever the organization is doing currently from governance, risk, compliance perspective is so important, and I believe they should evolve and adopt digital trust ecosystem framework as a main framework to measure the success of their business goals and IT goals and cybersecurity as well goals in a unified roadmap.
Yeah, excellent, man. Excellent. I'll tell you, we're getting some great information here. Ed, last but not least, your turn.
Yeah, so I know we've been talking a lot about the digital trust, but I think one of the key things to take away from this is that while we talk about digital trust, it is built on business relationships and not solely a technical matter, right? We need to make sure that we're cultivating those trust and those relationships, the interactions, and not lose sight of the forest for the trees of technology, right? We tend, I know at least I do, working in cybersecurity, we tend to focus on the bits and bytes and not the squishy gray matter. So it's not just a technology thing. It is definitely a business focused initiative.
You got it. Hey, everybody, thank you very much for that last follow-up there. That was really cool. And it was so nice to catch up with you all. I just think it's great that we got such representation from around the world. We've got one more webinar in this 4-webinar series coming up next week. So if anybody's interested in this, we've got a really good lineup of speakers in this one as well. And we're going to be talking about the age of AI and emerging technologies. We've had a lot of questions from a lot of folks talking about AI. We heard just a few minutes ago, quantum, a lot of things. So that's going to be the focus of next Thursday's webinar. Hopefully you get a chance to join us out there. To my panelists and my friends, thank you very much for joining today. I know that for some of you it's awfully late, and for some of you it's awfully early, but I truly appreciate everybody joining, and hopefully get a chance to see everybody next week. And you guys have a great weekend. If your weekend starts today, which mine will be, my weekend's going to start today, so I'm going to enjoy my Easter holiday, and I hope you all do the same. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks, everyone. Cheerio from
Thank you.
Glasgow.
Everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Mhm.